What? You're still working as a doctor in that poor clinic in the middle of nowhere? After all the effort you put into getting your medical license? Is that really how you want to spend your life? At a conference in New York that I attended for the first time in a long while, it was my college classmate, Jones, who mocked me. You took over your parents' clinic, didn't you? Why would you want to open a tiny clinic in such an isolated place? Oh, I get it. You were always at the bottom, a dropout doctor. I'd love to see the faces of the bottom-tier parents who made their son become such a lowly doctor. Suddenly, a low voice came from behind. I am the parent. Is there a problem? When I looked at the person speaking, Jones's face turned pale. My name is James Smith. I'm in my late 50s and working as a doctor. I work at Smith Clinic, which was founded by my grandfather. My father used to run this clinic after him, but he left 30 years ago. Since then, I have been working at the clinic, following in my father's footsteps, having just finished my residency at the time. The clinic is located about a 3-hour drive from New York, deep in the mountains. It's what you call a sparsely populated area, with nothing but a quiet forest, a clear river, and kind people. But that's enough for me. Some people might think working in the mountains isn't profitable. However, my grandfather volunteered to open the clinic here in this sparsely populated area, to help people who struggled because the hospital was far away. Continuing his mission, I had worked at this clinic for many years, but a day came when this routine was shattered. My mother passed away 3 years ago. The cause was a heart attack. She used to help at the clinic every day as a staff member. She probably overworked herself. While my mother was being taken to a large hospital in an ambulance after collapsing at the clinic, I was able to talk with her. James, can you hear me? Yes, Mom, I can hear you. I'm sorry for collapsing suddenly during such a busy time. Don't worry about that. Just try not to talk too much. I responded as calmly as possible, but I knew my mother wouldn't survive. It was a frustrating and sad feeling to be able to make such a judgment even at a time like this. Lying in the ambulance, my mother stared intently upward, with sweat on her forehead. The 4 tubes and the ventilator were medical devices I was familiar with. But now, they appeared to me as precious objects keeping my mother alive. James, there's something I need to tell you. Don't push yourself. It's about your father. I think you should know. My mother continued to talk in a surprisingly calm tone. I checked her pulse to find it stable, feeling a glimmer of hope that her condition might be improving. I'm listening. What kind of doctor have you been aiming to be? The sudden question left me speechless. My mother was always reserved and had never delved deeply into my career before. But I knew that reassuring her was the priority right now. What kind? I don't think I've ever really considered it. I just want to be a doctor who can help the patient in front of me. What do you think about your father? My father. When I was young, my father worked at this clinic deep in the mountains. But a long time ago, he left, saying he wanted to work at a big hospital in the city. Honestly, I don't really understand Dad. But I think Grandpa was amazing for opening this clinic. I respect him for ensuring people in the mountains could receive medical care without abandoning anyone. When I said that, my mother seemed to smile gently. Have you ever wondered why your dad left the mountain clinic? What? To be honest, I had always wondered. Right after my dad left, I even considered asking Grandpa about it. But at that time, Grandpa became very silent and suddenly grumpy. Remembering that, I continued cautiously. I did wonder, but neither Grandpa nor you seemed willing to talk about it. That's true, but since this is a good opportunity, I want to tell you everything. With that, my mother began to talk about my father's past, a topic that had never been touched upon. The ambulance still seemed far from the hospital, with the sound of tires on the asphalt echoing continuously. You know your dad initially worked at this clinic, right? He took over from your grandfather and treated patients here for many years. Twice a week. He also worked at a big hospital in New York. He diagnosed difficult cases and continued his research, thinking he could apply that knowledge to local health care. But then an incident occurred that made your dad change his plans. An incident. I looked at my mother, surprised by this revelation. I always thought my dad left the clinic 30 years ago because he got tired of living in the mountains. But then my mom, in a calm tone, started to reveal an astonishing truth. It was early in the spring, early in the morning. The police called about an accident on the subway. They said it was serious, and about 10 doctors were dispatched. When your dad went to the emergency center to prepare, patients started arriving one after another. Ambulances kept coming, bringing in people whose hearts and breathing had stopped. Your dad said he was shaken by the severity of the situation. Over 2 hours, more than 600 patients flooded the hospital, and everyone was shouting to be heard. It was like a battlefield, your dad said. After telling this part, my mom let out a deep sigh. Though her pulse was stable now, I wanted to hear everything she had to say in her final moments. But at that time, the only one giving calm instructions was the hospital director where your dad worked. Your dad was desperately performing CPR on someone whose heart had stopped, trying to save them. But even though he was working frantically, the body grew colder. As I listened to my mom's story, I thought about my dad's feelings at that time. He must have been desperate, wondering why he couldn't save this person despite doing everything he had learned. My mom continued quietly. Then the director walked by and told him to stop. He said there were others who could still be saved, and your dad needed to give up on those he couldn't save. Sorting patients based on the severity and urgency of their treatment. You mean triage? Yes, the director then performed triage, categorizing patients into severe, moderate, and mild, and decided where to place them in the hospital. Seeing this shook the foundation of what your dad believed about medicine. Hearing this, I realized something too. Medical care isn't just about treating everyone indiscriminately. Sometimes, in a large hospital, you have to make harsh choices to save those who can still be saved. The director convinced your dad that the best thing he could do for a fading life was to entrust his feelings to the lives that would go on. After experiencing that, your dad told your grandfather that he wanted to work at a big hospital instead of the clinic. But they had an argument and parted ways on bad terms. Your dad left the mountain clinic to you and departed. After finishing the story, my mother closed her eyes, looking tired. But it's strange that I, your dad's wife, am ending up in a big hospital at the end. What are you talking about? It's not the end yet. Even as I said that, I could feel that my mother's end was coming. Having seen many patients, I could tell these things. Satisfied after telling her story, my mother took a deep breath and seemed to fall asleep. When the ambulance arrived at the big hospital, I was helped out and given an explanation by the paramedics. My mother needed emergency surgery, but because so much time had passed, the chances of success were 50-50. I was told to contact family members as soon as possible, and one person came to mind. I'll contact my father, I told the paramedics, who then reminded me to make sure he could get there before the surgery, which was scheduled for an hour later. I took out my cell phone and looked for my dad's contact information. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the call button, and the impersonal ringing echoed. How long did I wait? Suddenly, the ringing stopped, and I heard a quiet voice. Yes, this is Smith. It's been a while, Dad. It's me, your son, James. James. My father sounded surprised on the phone. That was to be expected. Since he left the clinic, he had completely cut off contact with us. I'm sorry to call out of the blue. The thing is, Mom collapsed, and she will have emergency surgery in an hour. It seems to be a heart attack. Can you come now? What? Your mom? The hospital is located. I calmly gave my father the name and location of the hospital as he gasped in shock. He replied in a heavy, formal voice, "Got it, I'll be there soon," and hung up. After that, I moved with my mother to the emergency ward. About 40 minutes later, a black car pulled up in front of the hospital, and a man in a white coat got out. "James, it's been a long time. It's been a long time." My father, whom I hadn't seen in 30 years, had white hair but looked remarkably fit for someone in his 70s. "When did you get to the hospital?" "About 40 minutes ago, Dad. You got here quickly too." "This is the hospital where I work." I was stunned by this unexpected revelation. But there was no time to talk, as my mother, lying on a stretcher, was wheeled out surrounded by several doctors. "Hey, it's me. Do you recognize me?" My father called out loudly to my mother. As the stretcher moved toward the room, my father walked alongside me, continuously talking to her. "It's going to be okay. I'm here with you. You have to fight. Keep fighting. Honey." In response to my father's voice, my mother seemed to smile with her eyes closed. Then, slowly, she opened her eyes. "You came. My wife's life is at stake. What kind of husband wouldn't come? I'm sorry for the intrusion. You don't need to talk. Just hang in there. You're going to be fine." Tears glistened in my father's eyes as he kept encouraging my mother. Seeing his face, my mother smiled slowly again and said, "Thank you. I've finally understood. A person's life is okay. I understand. But don't give up until the end." At that moment, we arrived at the operating room, and my mother was taken inside. I couldn't say anything, but I deeply etched their conversation into my heart. The light above the operating room door turned on, and my father stood frozen in front of the tightly closed doors. Seeing his dazed figure, I gently talked to him. "Dad, let's sit down." "Yes, you're right." We sat side by side on a bench, waiting for what felt like an eternity. And then, my mother departed for a distant place. When we received the news, tears welled up in my father's eyes. A heart attack's outcome depends on how well initial care is handled. I knew this from the beginning, and I believe my mother was happy to have spoken with my father in her final moments. At the wake, my father quietly spoke to me. "You've grown up well, James. You were working at that hospital." "Yes, I'm sorry for leaving home so abruptly. Didn't your mom tell you anything?" "Not really, but she told me a lot at the end, about the subway incident and why you left the clinic." Hearing this, my father's brow furrowed. "The truth is, I'm still unsure. I left home back then with a determined mind, but now, having lost my wife, I question if my decision was truly right. But I think Mom understood." "What?" My father turned to me, wiping his tears. "At the end, Mom told you she finally understood. I think that feeling grew within her, to entrust her life to those still living. That's why she shared your story with me." My father slowly nodded at my words. Then, he turned his gaze to my mother's face, which looked as if she were peacefully sleeping. "Entrusting your feelings to the lives that remain, right?" "Yes, I think what she told me was her final wish." My father's eyes were still wet with tears. But to me, his expression seemed to soften a little. I continued to stay in touch with my father. It felt like a precious bond my mother had left behind. 6 months later, I heard my father would be giving a lecture at a conference in New York. so I decided to go. I was invited to this large conference where doctors from all over the country would gather. There, I ran into my college classmate, Jones. What? You're still working as a doctor in that poor clinic in the mountains, after all the effort to get your medical license? Is that really how you want to spend your life? Jones had the same arrogant attitude as in college, still believing he was superior to everyone else. You took over your parents' clinic, didn't you? I can understand if it was in the city, but choosing to be a physician in the mountains, I can't believe it. What? Surprised by his rude tone, I widened my eyes. Jones smirked condescendingly. Why would anyone want to open a tiny clinic in the middle of nowhere? Oh, I get it. You were always at the bottom, weren't you? You can't make it as a doctor in the city, so you move to the countryside and work in a small clinic. That's your limit. No, I'm giving my all as a doctor in my own way. Anyone can say that. Unlike me being an elite since college, you're just a dropout doctor. I'd love to see the faces of the parents who made their son such a lowly doctor. Jones kept talking proudly. At that moment, a deep voice suddenly came from behind. I'm the parent, is there a problem? There stood my father, who had just given a lecture in front of a large audience of doctors, with a serious expression on his face. There were various hospital directors and renowned doctors from different fields behind him. Seeing the rows of white coats, Jones's face turned pale. Jones, right, I just heard someone mocking my son and me. Surely, it wasn't you, was it? No, of course not. I was just expressing my admiration for James, my old college friend, who has been dedicated to rural medicine throughout his career. Jones, trying to cover up, laughed nervously and hastily made excuses. But as he spoke, his eyes darted around uneasily. Hearing Jones's response, my father cleared his throat deliberately. You said you'd like to see the face of the parent, right? Well, I'm James's father. What do you think now that you've seen me? But more importantly, James is a dedicated doctor, far better than I am. Then one of the doctors behind my father, looking apologetic, bowed deeply to me. Dr. Smith, I sincerely apologize for this. Jones was extremely rude. No, it's okay. It's true that Jones and I were college classmates. No, I must apologize. Jones had been watching our exchange in a daze. But when he saw the doctor speaking to me, he jumped and shouted. What? The director? When Jones called him the director, the doctor gave him a stern look and began to speak. Dr. James Smith's father, Dr. John Smith, is the president of this conference. And this is Dr. James Smith, his son, who is dedicated to providing medical care in the mountains. Yes, a truly admirable dedication. Jones, I've told you repeatedly to stop looking down on others. I hoped you would understand eventually, so I've been lenient with you. But I can't overlook this anymore. We need to talk after the conference. With that, the director walked away. Left behind, Jones collapsed to the floor like a wilting plant hit by boiling water. The arrogance he had shown moments ago vanished, and he curled up on the floor. I walked past Jones and headed towards my father. Great job on the lecture. I attended, and it was very informative. Thank you. Speaking in front of doctors from all over the country is quite an experience. It was an excellent presentation. Also, thank you for your help earlier. Well, I couldn't just ignore that. I got a bit carried away for my age. Indeed, I was quite angry myself. So was I. My father smiled gently. He looked very lively for someone in his 70s. By the way, James, I have a proposal for you. What is it? How about working with me at the hospital where I work? I understand how much you value the clinic. But the more I interact with you, the more impressed I am with your skills. I want you to save more lives on a larger scale. That's what I've come to think." His expression was full of sincerity and kindness. I could tell he genuinely cared about me. It was a generous offer, but my resolve remained unchanged. "I appreciate the offer. But you know how I feel, Dad. I have patients waiting for me back home, even as we speak. Writing important papers and gaining fame from difficult surgeries is admirable, but I find my purpose in helping those patients. I believe that's the only way to carry on Mom's legacy of entrusting her life to me." "Yes, I thought you'd say that. I'm sorry for testing you. It's not good for an old man to be so selfish. Consider it an old man's joke and forget about it." "No, I'm glad you think so highly of me." When I said that, my father smiled happily. It was a clear and beautiful expression, similar to my mother's just before she passed away. Then my father and I left the conference in New York. Later, I heard that Jones was transferred from the hospital where he had worked to another hospital in the same network. For Jones, who was on the elite track in a large hospital, this was effectively a dismissal. But since it was technically a promotion, he couldn't complain and ended up working quietly at a regional hospital. He reportedly appealed for years to return to his original hospital, but the director never listened to him. Meanwhile, I left the hustle and bustle of the city and headed home. "Welcome back, Dr. Smith. Thank you for your hard work." When I returned to the clinic in the mountains, a nurse stopped me before I could even have a cup of tea. "No, I'm not tired at all. I was just listening to a lecture. Thank you for taking care of things while I was away. Was there anything unusual?" Mr. Williams from First Street called saying he had a headache. It seems like his usual migraine. And Mr. Johnson from 3rd Street said he forgot his appointment and is running out of his medication. "That's troubling. Let's prepare the medicine for Mr. Johnson right away." As I gave instructions efficiently, the nurse looked at me with concern. "But you should rest a little." "I'm fine. I can't keep the patients waiting." Saying that, I quickly put on my white coat. Here, there's a quiet forest, a clear river, and kind people. And that is enough. In the clinic my father left behind, a calm atmosphere prevails once again today.